Yeah, but do you see how it's kind of inherently subjective there? Because
well, we're both in faith-based systems. I mean, the atheists have a faith-based system. The Christianity has a faith-based system.
So can you explain that a little bit? Because I don't see myself as having faith. Like I don't have faith in anything as far as the same way that religious faith operates. Like I don't have. I'm not part of a faith system just because I don't believe in a God.
I can't even remember the guy's name. This is terrible. It's how well you did indoctrinating me on your channel. The vampire guy who spoke at PragerU. You called him the vampire the whole time.
Stephen.
Yes.
Oh crap.
Stephen somebody. Yeah. Stephen Vampire.
Yeah.
And so you spent your time dealing with Mr. Vampire. One of the things you said is, so one of his arguments was about, and we need to come back to Paley's watchmaker because you completely dismissed it in my other video. And I think it's a valid argument. So I want to come back to Paley's watchmaker, but he essentially went the same direction. He's like, we see the design, it points to a designer. And you said that, and I'm going to be really close and correct me if I'm wrong. You said basically we're just, we have patterns in our brain and we are, biological, like we've evolved to see patterns and we see a pattern of design and that helped us survive through evolution, but now it's hurting us in the modern world. And so you would look at something that I would say, this is designed. And you would say, it looks designed, but it's not. And so to me, I have to have a lot of faith to say, this looks designed, but I'm been told it's not designed. That takes an act of faith for me. So that's why I'd say we're both in faith-based systems here.
Okay. Well, so what I don't have faith that let's just choose a flower because that's usually what people go to, but it's easy to picture it in your head. I don't have faith that a flower isn't designed. I get how people perceive it to be designed, the way that the flower looks, how it operates, and all this other stuff. But you see, the thing is that we have natural processes that explain why a flower forms the way that it does. Like there's different reasons for the coloring on it. There's different reasons for why chlorophyll formed in order to generate glucose out of sunlight or produce glucose out of from the sunlight and all this other stuff. Like we have natural explanations for how those mechanisms and those things developed over time. And so it's not that I have faith that something that looks designed but isn't designed. I don't have faith that it isn't designed. I know that it's not designed because I understand that natural processes don't require a God as far as we understand it right now.
But that's like saying that because gas and combustion makes an engine run and we can understand that the fuel pump takes the gas to the engine, it combusts. That's like saying because I can explain that, there's no need for a mechanic to put the fuel pump in the car. And we both know that, that design, that process does not happen by itself. Someone had to design it. And so why is it wrong for me to assume when I see a car there was a mechanic than for me to look at a flower and realize there's a flower maker somewhere? Why is that?
Because we know that cars are designed and built by humans. Humans are the intelligent designers of cars. We know that that's the case. And when it comes to flowers and natural processes, we don't have evidence that there is some entity out there that is required for natural processes to happen. And until we can bridge that,
the existence of the designed object is the proof required for a designer. Like the existence of
I mean,
mechanic, right?
Well, so for the car, we don't have any natural processes that explain how a car just naturally comes into existence. But we do have natural processes for how flowers grow and form and how organisms evolve over time. So, I mean, we have natural explanations for those things. We don't have a similar natural explanation other than, humans intelligently designing a car and putting it together. We don't have, there's no way that you can plant something in the ground and grow a Ferrari. Right. But a seed you can plant in the ground, and due to, the different biological processes that it goes through to grow a flower. So, I mean, those are two different things right there.
I'm not understanding how they're different, because I would say the more complex the system, the more obvious the need for a designer. And yeah, like I said, we understand how fuel makes the engine combust, but then we also know that someone had to put all that stuff together. And I would say the more complex the system, the more obviously we have a need for a designer. And so when I look at a human body and I look at a blood pressure system and the heartbeat and all that, and I see this, that tells me, well, somebody had to design it. And sure, maybe I can observe the natural process at work. I can see it happening. That's like me seeing a car go down the road and being like, don't worry, kids, we know that the fuel goes from the fuel pump to the engine. That's how it goes. It didn't need a mechanic. Just because we can observe the natural process happening doesn't mean that someone didn't design the natural process that's taking place in front of us.
Well, but we don't have evidence that somebody did design the natural process. See, that's the key for me there, is that we don't have any evidence that suggests that we need a designer for the natural process. The natural process is just there. And until you can prove the need for a designer, or until you can prove the need for some intelligent source to make that process work, for me, there's just no need for that explanation.
So what are the criteria to know if something's designed or not?
I mean, that's the ultimate question for the teleological argument, right? How do you differentiate design?
Yeah, but I'm not asking William Lane Craig. I'm asking you. Like, what are your criteria as an atheist to know something's designed?
Well, I mean, I understand that. I'm just trying to contextualize it in the sure. Topic of the teleological argument. And I feel like that's the crux of it, because I feel like in the teleological argument, everything's designed, right? Just it's kind of scattershot. Everything's designed. So everything needs a designer. Whereas in a more natural perspective, the objects that are designed, like as in these things are not naturally occurring, like as far as we experience it. Like examples of that would be like cars, planes, bridges, as far as bridges as we know them to be designed,
Sure.
But the undesigned, what I would call undesigned objects, are objects or things that come into existence through natural processes. And so if there's a natural like a mountain is not designed. I don't consider flowers to be designed, because, there's a natural process for how organisms change. That would be evolution. And then there's natural processes that explain how you can go from a seed to a plant. There's natural processes for all of that. Those natural processes happen regardless of whether or not there's some intelligent source around, as far as we can detect. Natural processes operate without the need for an intelligence.
But how do you define, what are your defining characteristics for what is designed and what isn't designed? How do you tell those things apart?
Well, I mean, like I said, it's whether or not you have natural processes to explain the object that you're looking to explain. And by natural processes, what I'm talking about here are processes that occur without the need for an intelligent being's interference. So like mountains or caves, natural caves, obviously not man-made caves or anything like that, but like caves or other natural formations. I guess you could say like a good example using the mountains idea is like Mount Rushmore, right? Okay. Now, obviously, I would identify that as something that has been intelligently designed and carved. Sure. But that's primarily because, this is something that is from our history. This is something that a human being would know about that's appeared on the side of a rock. But does that translate to just a regular mountain sitting there? Well, no, because we have plate tectonics that explain how mountains grow. We've got wind and water erosion that explain the shape of a mountain. So just like a natural mountain that just exists out there is different than a mountain that's been carved by humans, because we can identify, the shape that's carved in on the side of it. And it's very obviously something that's been carved by a human that's at least lived at the time or something like that. It's very obvious. It's a very obvious carving that somebody has done versus just a regular plain old mountain that has natural processes to explain it. Like we don't have a natural process necessarily to explain why perfectly chiseled heads appeared on the side of a mountain. Like the natural explanation for that is an intelligent being, a human, carved it into that. But like if we have a mountain that sort of looks like it has a face on it, like it could, like we recognize that to kind of be sort of like a face. I mean, you can explain that through pareidolia, wind erosion, water erosion, and plate tectonics. Like
the problem with that is it's only working if you can recognize the elements of design you need, which means you can look at it and you can say, I know a human carved the faces of Mount Rushmore. However, if there is a being whose design processes you don't recognize because they're not like a human and they are being designed, then you're just seeing a natural process and attributing it to a natural process with forgetting a designer. Like if my tarantula thinks his stick has always been in his cage and he says, well, the stick's always been here because the stick is here. He's forgetting that someone set up the cage before he got there and put the stick in it. And it could be the same with the mountains. Just because you don't recognize a human level of design doesn't mean there wasn't another kind of designer that's above humans creating that you don't recognize because it's not the way humans would design Rushmore.
Well, now I do have to agree with you on this, but it's just because my position has always been that we don't have any evidence that says a designer or an intelligent being is needed for natural processes. And so if you can prove that link, that an intelligent being is required for natural processes to happen, then you would have a good argument for saying that, well, even naturally occurring objects are designed because you got this intelligent being that set up these processes and this is the outcome of those processes. But the problem is that you don't have that link. Like there's nothing that says that an intelligent being is required for natural processes to happen. As far as we can tell and detect, there's no intelligence behind natural processes. And so for me, the way that I go about it, the way that I see it is that unless you can prove that is necessary, then there's no reason to believe that it's there. Now, it's not that I'm ruling out the possibility. I'm totally open to the possibility of it. I just don't see the evidence that it's required, and therefore I don't believe it to be true currently.
Well, and we don't have to spend all our time here on teleological argument, but that would be where we'd be an impasse, because anything that I would see as evidence is going to be, you're going to reject that as evidence. And so that's not going to work, because I'm going to say, well, I've got evidence. I think the Bible's going to provide me some evidence. I'm going to say the existence of these things is evidence itself. And you're going to say, no, I don't believe that is. So that's where we're going to get stuck at an impasse there, because we're going to have different sources of evidence. And then we got to figure out where we're deciding what is true. And, yeah, so that's a whole nother discussion.